Hey guys, my name is Ahmed, and before I continue on with this presentation, I'll hit you guys with a quick disclaimer. I'm doing this video as a part of the Computer Security course taught by Dr.Sue Fitzgerald. Due to the nature of the presented topics, this video is solely for educational purposes, and that I'm not liable for any damages that could be caused by the following demonstrations. The majority of this presentation will be on the topic of Kovter malware. So let's get to it. Hopefully by the end of this presentation you'll understand the introduction to malware. You know what malware is essentially. Even if you've never heard of it before, I'll go over it. The different forms of web malware. There's multiple forms of malware, and they all function differently. And then we'll get into the introduction to the actual topic this presentation will be on, which is the Kovter malware. We'll get into the Kovter malware's point of entry, where it comes from the internet to your workstation, and what paths it takes, the most common point of entries. Then we'll go into how Kovter works when it's downloaded. So let's just say you are the unfortunate soul that downloaded this malware. What do you expect this malware to do essentially? And how do you know you've been affected? So we'll go into different little tidbits here and there that you'll notice from your computer that sort of gives it away that your computer is affected with something. It might not just be the Kovter malware, it could be another type of malware, or it could be a combination of more than one malware. And then we'll go into user prevention techniques. So what the average Joe needs to prevent himself from being affected from not just the Kovter malware, but all malware essentially. You can't just be protected from one specific malware with disregarding all other malware. So this presentation will go into just general user prevention techniques that you can use that can be your line of defense when it comes to protecting yourself from malware. Then we'll go into company mitigation techniques. So let's just say you're not a user, but you own a company, and you're trying to get your employees to essentially not download these malware, so it causes any harm to your assets. So we'll get into mitigation techniques companies can use to prevent malware from infiltrating into their system or network. So let's get to it. Beginning off, introduction to malware. Before we get into the subject of Kovter malware, you should first understand what malware is. The word malware is an abbreviation of malicious software. Funny word, play on words. Malware. This type of software is intentionally designed to cause damage to a computer. It causes damage after it's introduced or implanted in some way onto a user's computer, and can take many forms. So in the next slide we'll find out what kind of forms it takes. So the different forms of malware. Well, there's adware. Malware that automatically delivers advertisement. Most common in pop-up ads and websites. I'm sure you guys have experienced some type of adware where you can go into a site and you click on something and you get a little pop-up and it's an advertisement for something, and you, like regular people, just click out of it. So that little, that's a type of malware itself, adware. Moving on, there's a ransomware. It's a malware that holds a computer system hostage while demanding a ransom. So this type of malware, essentially, it functions, it's like a pop-up essentially, but it kind of locks down your computer system. It prevents you from clicking out of it, and Sometimes it takes the theme of either an FBI. You've probably seen it before, like an FBI saying, "Oh, you stumbled upon something that's illegal. Pay this fine to continue your regular access." So it freezes your computer until the ransom is made. Moving on, there's spyware. It's a malware that functions by monitoring on a user's activity. So essentially, this spyware functions by monitoring a user activity. So this user activity can either be keystrokes, looking into the web history. So a keylogger that records a keystroke is a type of spyware. Moving on, rootkit. It's a malware designed to remotely access or control without being detected by computer system or computer security. So this type of malware essentially allows another person to remotely access your system and control it and make certain changes and modify things. So these are just some most common malware that people know. There's other malware, but just focusing on these. Moving on. So the majority of the focus of this presentation will be on Kovter malware. So just an introduction to what Kovter is. Now that we know what malware is, from here on out we will be looking at Kovter malware. The Kovter malware has been around since 2014, and it's a type of malware that started off as police ransomware. So we looked at ransomware before. It's a type of malware that locks down your computer and demands ransom, and this time it's the Kovter malware started off as police ransomware. It took on the theme of law enforcement and to get you to pay that ransom and make it more believable essentially. And it evolved into an evasive fileless malware, with such malware some malware can be a combination of other malwares and evolve constantly, and it only makes it harder for people to reverse engineer it, but malware is constantly evolving. So Kovter malware evolved from a police ransomware to a fileless malware existing exclusively in computer memory, the RAM, which is a temporary memory, and doesn't write any part of its activities to the computer's hard drive. Usually most malware writes something onto the hard drive in order to be executed, leaving behind a little residue to be detected by Kovter, but Kovter, being a fileless type of malware, on the other hand, avoids such detections. So Kovter, being a fileless malware, it doesn't leave behind any residue for detection software to catch on it. Moving on. So moving on to Kovter point of entry. So where does the Kovter miraculously just appear on your computer? Well, the Kovter infection is spread through several means. One being visiting infected website or web pages, and the other being spam emails. So malicious websites use exploit kits to detect vulnerabilities of a computer's operating systems and install this malware without the user's consent. So just visiting these malicious websites or clicking on them, they can install malicious malware in the background. So you really have to be careful of which websites you access. With spam emails, the malware is spread through infected attachments or links to malicious websites. These emails are formatted to mimic or impersonate actual companies. Most popular scam emails impersonate transportation companies to indicate a package is on its way to you, and usually contains a tracking link that is infected with the Kovter malware. Usually everyone has an email, and within your email, either Gmail or whatever email services you use, they do a good job by filtering such emails and categorizing them as spam emails. But sometimes certain emails can slip past through the filtration settings, and make its way into your inbox. So you have to know what to do when these type of emails come into your inbox. Just because it comes to your inbox doesn't mean it's clear and good to go and it's not spam. You'd have to take a closer look at it and examine it, make sure that it's actually coming from a valid source and you actually ordered something. Because these contain a tracking link that, if you click unaware, it can lead to an infection of your system. So be careful. Moving on. This is how the Kovter malware actually works, essentially. So you get the Kovter malware from a spam email. It installs components for shell spawning techniques. So it installs different files, a batch file, and other files it needs to necessarily function within and flourish within your system. And how does it do this? When it installs these components for the shell spawning techniques, it creates a registry entry containing a malicious scripts. So a registry entry is like a part of a hierarchy database that is critical for the operation of Windows and the application and the services that runs it. So it's a critical part of Windows and other operating systems. So if it's spreading these, if it's creating these malicious scripts within this registry entry, then it will inject a shell code in the PowerShell process upon system restart or upon execution of the shortcut or batch file. What this means, shell code is just basically a carefully instructed set of lists that can be executed once the code is injected into a running application. And this code happens when essentially your system is restarted. So as soon as the system restarts, the injected shell code will get a set of instructions going for how the Kovter will function. And what it actually does is that the shell code will then spawn an executable process after it's started through when the system is restarted. Then the execution process that will connect to various URLs. So once the shell code spawns an executable, the executable process connect to various URLs. So executable cause you to connect to various URLs for click fraud, and which is repeatedly clicking on advertisement hosted on a website with the intention of generating revenue for that site. So this is where the underlying thing of the Kovter comes from. Remember it evolved from the police ransomware, where it tried to ransom you to get money off of you through shutting down your system. Well, since that was stopped by antiviruses, it evolved to a fileless system where it does this shell code spawning to get the executable to get you to click on various URLs for click fraud. So this is still trying to profit off of you, essentially. Moving on. How do you know you've been infected? Well, like anyone knows when they've been infected by a virus or a malware. It doesn't just have to be the Kovter. You'll notice that your programs are frequently crashing and freezing. You've noticed some of your files have been modified or deleted. You find strange program icons that you didn't download. Emails are sent automatically without your knowledge. Overall slow computer speed. These are just little things. You don't have to notice all this, but if you notice maybe one or two of these things, it's best for you to try to get a diagnostic test or have your computer scanned for any type of malware, because these are just warning signs, red flags, so to speak, to get you to create your own security system, essentially. Moving on. Now that you know let's just say one of those things from the previous slide, you notice your computer is slowing down. So what do? Now you think that you're infected. Well, these are little tips for the average Joe, which are prevention techniques to prevent malware from coming to your system. Enable your pop-up blocker. What it does, it prevents ads and other pop-ups from spreading malicious programs. Avoid third-party installations. If you suspect a site to be malicious, don't download anything from it. Before downloading anything from a site, do some research on the company and check some reviews to validate its authenticity. Keep Windows updated. Outdated Windows operating systems are an easy target for malicious malware to spread. Regularly a backup. By periodically backing up data, you ensure that your data is safe and the integrity of it is upheld. The next one is a no-brainer. Install an antivirus. That cannot be said enough because it adds more of a security layer or precaution, and it's a common practice to have an antivirus software to detect and remove any virus that may be on your workstation or computer or laptop. Even though you don't think that your computer system is infected, it's good to have an antivirus because the best prevention is an antivirus, essentially. Moving on to the next slide. Company mitigations. So what companies can do to decrease the risk, threat, and vulnerabilities of their overall system from malware and any other such malicious software or any downloads like that. Have policies, procedures, standards, and guidelines in place because it creates a framework on how company assets should be used or handled. Example, acceptable use policy, which defines actions that are and are not allowed with respect to company assets. Also implement a security awareness and training program. Let's face it, the weakest link in an IT infrastructure is within the user domain, and the system can only be as strong as its weakest link. So implementing a formal training process for employees decreases the risk of infection on company assets, deters threats from being realized on assets, and reduces the vulnerability of the company's IT infrastructure as a whole. Secure the PowerShell, because we looked at before, the fileless malware frequently abuses the PowerShell by injecting code that will spawn an expectable process to connect to various URLs for click fraud. By securing the PowerShell, fileless malware won't be able to inject shell code to impact company assets. So if you secure the PowerShell code, you will be able to prevent essentially fileless malware, hence you don't have to worry about Kovter in general. Moving on, we're done with the presentation. At this point of the presentation, I'd like to demonstrate a couple of demos for you guys and get you prepared in your way to be more, how should I put it, malware savvy and know what malware is and how to prevent it. Close this window. So this website I have pulled up is AVS. It has a free antivirus protection, and I know you guys heard of other antivirus protection, the most famous being Norton, but if you're on a tight budget like me, college student, you'll be looking for more free resources when it comes to antiviruses. Also, if you have a laptop, you can always bring it into the IT department. I'm sure that the school, if you're a college student, have within universities a free virus, or they can check for viruses and get your laptops clean. If not, if you're not a student and you don't have any kids or anyone that you know that's a student, best look online for free antivirus. Or if you're more, how should I say it, financially free, my recommendation would be go with Norton, because they have the most options when it comes to antivirus features. But the one I went with is Avast, and the thing I liked about Avast essentially is that it has a lot of features too. It has, you can look right here, cyber capture, analyzes suspicious files automatically and pushes a cure to everyone if they're a threat. So this would be good for suspicious files, for any other malware that detects that tries to attach itself into a file. It would be good to analyze it. It has password, manages your passwords. Intelligent antivirus, it blocks malware. So this is what we want: malware, spyware, ransomware, phishing. Phishing is essentially when someone sends you spam email trying to get information out of you, so it blocks those. Behavior shield, smart scan, Wi-Fi inspector, browser cleanup, and has game mode. But this is just the features it has from the website. Going to the actual application, it does have a nice, it has looking at the interface of the application itself. This is just a screen once you download it, so you can run a smart scan. It checks for weak passwords, viruses, browser add-ons, network threats. So while this is running, let's take a look at more of the features that this software has. Let's go into this protection. So you get to choose your core defenses. So file shield, you can, by enabling it, scans any file added to you or opened on your PC. Behavior shield warns you if any application behaves suspiciously. So this is good to have enabled. So make sure the integrity of your applications or data stays intact, and warns you if anything changes. Web shield blocks web attacks and unsafe downloads. Mail shield blocks dangerous email attachments. So this is just different shields to protect your overall computer system. So it has, if you buy the premium version, of course, it has webcam shielding, stop webcam spying. So it stops someone from accessing your webcam and spying on you remotely. Can block sensitive data shield, protect your sensitive data. And just the free versions allow you to have, so these you don't really have to have a premium. So a secure line VPN, so you can browse in private by having a VPN, which just masks your IP address. Data shredder destroys files securely, so you can make sure when you destroy a file, it's destroyed completely. You don't have to worry about any resurrections, so to speak. Let's go back to status. So my SmartCast scan has finished. Let's take a look at the results. So right now I have no viruses, no bad browsers, no network issues found, no weak passwords found. I try to scan this at least maybe once or twice a week when I get the time or when I remember. Usually some antiviruses do it automatically in the background and do it periodically. But let's go through protection. One feature I liked about it was the Wi-Fi inspector. So I already did the scan before, and what it does is scans all the devices on your network. So if you see a device that you don't think should be on your network, it's a good way to identify it and take other measures, essentially, to get that device removed from your network. So these are just a couple of devices that I have on my network. Nice topology right here. That's a good feature to have. The premium version has a feature that avoids fake websites. Has a firewall, keep hackers out. So if you really want this software, it's a treasure trove for a lot of security measures to prevent unauthorized access or the damaging of your personal assets itself. So it's really good. I recommend it just because, even if you don't want to purchase it, it has some good features that are free. And it also has a performance test that also comes with a cleanup premium that's free, which it has maintenance tests. It just checks for browser cache. What it does, it just cleans out different stuff that's happening in the background to try to get your system to run a little bit smoother and faster. So this is just a free aspect to the program itself, It frees up space, optimizes your speed, and it fixes those problems. So you can tune it up. Right now it's at 99, but but you get the gist of how all this works. So let me get that out of there. So go to the PowerPoint real quick. So we went across, we already talked about the introduction to malware. We talked about the different forms of malware. We focused on what the presentation essentially was on, which is Kovter, and we little history, why it's dangerous is because it evolves, different variations, and then we learned about the most common point of entry Kovter malware uses to get into your system. We learned about how Kovter works when it's downloaded and what it does. Then moving on, we learned about how do you know if you've been affected with malware, not just Kovter, but malware in general. We looked at user prevention techniques to deter malware and prevent it. We looked at company mitigation techniques, what companies can do to educate their employees. And I think that'll be all for the presentation. Thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And I hope this presentation has been, at the very least, informative. And you've gotten from me a couple of resources that you can use to prevent yourself from getting affected by the Kovter malware and on all malware in general. So make good use of it. Thank you and goodbye.